Hello. Today we're going to talk about Terraform and specifically exploring the state file within Terraform and ways we can work with that. So our agenda, we're going to just quickly go over what we are implying that everyone understands at this point. This isn't a Terraform 101 type of presentation. I have other recordings that go through the basics of the language. We're going to cover a few of the Terraform commands that interact and use state. And then we're going to get into what state is, how that relates to remote state access and reference, and then go into a few demos. So just as an implied level of understanding, we're assuming that if you're watching this video, you already understand some of the basic Terraform commands like Terraform init, plan, apply, and destroy. If you're not familiar with those, I recommend you watching my Infrastructure as Code using Terraform Beginner Edition that goes through the basics of the Terraform language. We're also assuming that you understand the constructs of resource creation within a Terraform template. You understand the differences between the different resource types, the configurations that you put within those. Again, if you're not familiar with those, I recommend that you go watch that Terraform Beginners Edition presentation that I have on my YouTube channel. And then finally, for the file structure, the backends, providers, variables, outputs, the example Terraform file at the bottom of this screen, we're assuming that you understand the different constructs within there. So we don't need to go into detail to explain what those pieces do and how they operate. Some of the Terraform commands that work with the state file itself is Terraform show, that gives us the human readable output from our state file or our plan file, and Terraform taint, which marks a specific Terraform managed resource as tainted to be able to destroy and recreate it the next time you run your Terraform apply. So this is a good example to use taint when, say, as part of your execution, you're running some other scripts as part of, say, a virtual machine deployment that will not necessarily be executed just by modifying an existing object. You want to reinitialize all of that from the beginning. So just a few words about state. First of all, if you're not kind of aware, state is how Terraform keeps track of all the resources that we're building and managing. It keeps track of the values for all the properties as they're being built and created. So the actual real world values of what's been generated. It also uses it to manage change. So when you make a modification to your template, you're going to execute that. Terraform goes and looks at the state file and says, what are the differences? What do I need to update or remove or modify to make that new template the real world scenario? This is all part of that life cycle management of the resources. And briefly, this is the last point on this slide, is that you can keep a separate state file however you want to kind of organize your execution. So whether you're going to separate by environments, by resource groups, by shared services, and so forth, that kind of comes down to the whole life cycle of what that template is deploying and managing. Just a few words about remote state. When you're working in a team or a large organization, when we go back to the life cycle management point, you're going to execute your templates and the state of the real world is held in that file, but it's not like everyone's using that same location, that same file itself. When you want to separate that area of responsibility, say the networking team has their templates to manage all the networking stuff, you're not letting, say, the application team directly manipulate the real world of the networking environment, right? They might need to use some elements from that, but they're not going to modify the core networking. This is where remote state comes in, where you can share a reference to your remote state, as we see in the example here, and allow other teams to leverage certain outputs from that as part of their own separate Terraform templates and deployments. Now, as the slide mentions, you need to ensure that the root level output from your templates are what's being exposed as the output for the state. And so what this gets into is if you watch my intermediate series presentation on Terraform, if you're working with modules, those modules can have output from whatever resources they're creating, but that output and those values are not surfaced at the topmost level unless you kind of traverse or bubble those back up to the very top. And at the top root level is where you're taking the output value and making that available. That's what's going to be stored in the state file for the execution, and that's what's going to be referenced in this type of an example. So if you're not familiar with modules and how that kind of works, go take a look at one of my other videos I've recorded around Terraform Intermediate Edition, which we go into modules and reusability. So now we're going to get into the demo to be able to see certain activities with Terraform state specifically. Now there's two scenarios that we're going to be exploring today. Scenario number one will be that you have an existing resource that you've created using Terraform, but someone has made a change outside of the Terraform template, and now you need to update the existing state to reflect that change. So let's jump into that right now. So here I have my Terraform template file. Now I have all my Terraform declaration at the top and my backend being an Azure storage account. And this is the state file that I'm going to store that information in, which we'll go and explore in a moment. Further down here, we have variables, we have a resource group, and specifically we have a storage account that we're going to create. So let's go ahead and initiate this. It's going to initiate the backend, read the state, which doesn't exist yet. And then we're going to go Terraform plan as part of the process. Make this a bit bigger. Now it goes and reads the state file, if it exists, says what is there and what's going to change. Since all of this is new, it's all green. So I'm just going to go Terraform apply, auto approve so it doesn't prompt, so it can start the execution. So here, while that is kicking off, we see the plus green create, and these are all the resources that are going to be created because they don't exist as far as Terraform is concerned or knows. So we have our resource group, we have our storage account, we see that it's actually referencing the location property of the storage account if you noticed in the template file, and now it's off and creating the storage account itself. So we'll just give that a minute to finish. There it goes. So now we have our outputs, our storage account, access keys, and so forth if we wanted to use that as far as a connection string. If we go to the portal, we'll see this storage account in the portal. So here we are in the portal, and this is our resource group that we created, and this is our storage account that we created as part of our template. So notice here we don't have any tags. We did not have that specifically in the template file. So we're going to manually change it outside of Terraform and add a tag. And we're going to call it state. And we're going to call it broken. Hit save. And now we have a tag or something that's been changed on this storage account that Terraform does not know about. Let's go back to our code and see what happens from a Terraform standpoint. So here we are back in our Terraform code. We're going to go Terraform init again, just to double check. It's going to read the state file, what it knows to be true. We go Terraform plan. It again reads the state file, but that doesn't match what's in the real world. So it refreshes that state from the actual object as well to compare. And notice if we scroll up, Now we have a update in place. It needs to modify one object, which is our storage account. And notice here, it needs to modify the tag property because the template itself does not have a tag, whereas the existing storage account does because we modified it outside of Terraform. So it will revert it back. But let's say we want to be able to take this modification that someone did outside of Terraform and bring it in here. Well, we can see that this is the property that was modified. So we need to add that into our template code. And we can do so just by putting in that tag block. Now, obviously this has to match, but let's run this again. And I'm going to call out a couple differences when we look at the actual state file itself. So Terraform plan again. So we've added that bit to our code. It's going to do another refresh. Go look at the template, go look at the storage account, the existing object, and compare the two. Now it says no changes. The infrastructure is up to date because our template matches what's real world. But there's a problem with this. Let's go look at the actual state file and see what it says to identify this difference. So here I am back in the portal, and this is a separate storage account that I'm using to contain or hold my Terraform state. So if I go into the container, I go into my TF state folder, this is the name of the state file itself. If I edit it and look at the properties, we see our access keys and everything, all these other bits and pieces that were generated at the time of creating the resource object itself. And then here's our storage account. Notice when we look down through the properties and attributes that are listed for this, because it's alphabetical, tag is set to null. But in our Terraform code, when we added the tag to the template and reran the template, it said, well, there's nothing to change, everything matches. So this is a bit of a discrepancy. Even though our Terraform template itself and the real world object match, the state file itself doesn't know of that. So if we were to continue down the line with other changes, that would not yet be implemented in the state file itself. So let's go back to our code and let's rerun the Terraform apply command to reapply this template, and I'm going to get out of this state file so I don't lock it up. We're going to rerun the template file so that it will apply these changes and those values within the state file itself so that now the state will match as well as the Terraform template and the real world. So now it's finished. There's been no changes as far as an infrastructure is concerned, but now let's go back and look at that same area in our state file. If we scroll down to our storage account and look at our attributes and properties, now we see the entry for the tag and whatever we've labeled it as. So now our state file does match our real world. So there's a few steps that we need to kind of go about to be able to take something that's been modified outside of Terraform, put it into our Terraform template so that we account for that the next time we apply it, but then we also need to rerun the apply for the state file itself to be updated with those modifications. Now we're going to talk about our second scenario. This is where we have a pre-existing object, resource, infrastructure, whatever we want to call it, already in Azure, and we want to bring it under Terraform management. So we did not originally create it using Terraform, but we're taking an existing environment and now we want to manage it all through Terraform and infrastructure as code. So we see the code example here on my screen. So the first thing I've done is this little comment that I left for myself. I've created a network security group in the portal. So if I go over to the portal, we see in my resource group, I have my NSG sitting here, just blank vanilla NSG. Going back to the code, the first thing we need to do, aside from being logged in with Azure, which we already were from our previous process, is we need to get the resource ID, the specific ID of this object. So we're going to use this AZ show command specific to the network NSG. We're saying it's in this resource group, this is what it's called, and give me the ID. So this whole string, subscription number, blah, 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 this is what we're going to need later on. The next thing we need to do for importing an existing object under Terraform management and into Terraform state is we can create the blank resource for that object. So here we're just as if we're making a brand new network security group, but we're labeling it the same name. And that's all we need to do. So if we go to Terraform init, okay, Terraform plan. Oop, I missed a component in this. One moment. Okay, sorry about that. I figured out what I was doing wrong. So after we did the Terraform init, we did not actually have to do the Terraform plan. My mistake. So what we need to do is after we've initialized, we did Terraform import, and then we're passing the resource object, which is our network security group. This is what it's called in Terraform, not the label of the name, right? Just the Terraform object. And then we're passing that string that we had the output for the actual ID of the specific object. So we're associating this existing object with this specific resource declaration within the Terraform template. We haven't hit plan, but we just initialized. So we see after we ran that, it says import successful. So let's go and take a look at the state file after running that Terraform import. So here we are in our Terraform state file. This is the same state file that we used for that storage account example. And if we scroll down, we see here is our network security group, and here's the name that it has. So we're starting to get some of these details within the actual state for the existing object, and then here's that ID that we've imported. Let's go back to our file. Now, if we were to go Terraform plan now, it's going to tell us that we are still missing some of the required properties for this object type. So now we see that the output is telling us we are missing 2 required arguments, actually 3, my mistake, for this specific type of resource. Now, other resources will have other required properties as well. So we need a resource group name, we need a location, and we need the name of the object itself. Even though that is present in the state file, our Terraform template does not contain those properties. So to continue the import of the existing infrastructure under Terraform management, we need to fill in those other required default properties. So to do that, I'm just going to comment out this line and uncomment the new line that represents that. So if we compare this to our state file, name, location, and resource group need to match what that existing specific object has. Right? If we go back to our state, under our network security group, name, location, right? These are the values we need to, and then the resource group that it's a part of, right here. These are the values that our Terraform template itself needs to have to be able to match managing it through Terraform and what the state file knows as the real world, so that we're bringing it under that control or management. So let's go back to our template file. So we're going to run Terraform init again. Now that we have this in place, Terraform plan, and it should come back and tell us that there's 0 changes because the state has the object in it, and now our Terraform template has the right properties that match that up. And there we go. We have 0 infrastructure updates required. And that's how we've now brought an existing object into Terraform management, updating and importing into the state file. So now let's go back to our presentation just to wrap things up. So back on our presentation, I just want to leave everyone with a few resources to help you along your Terraform journey. First and foremost, I have my personal curated list of resources that includes articles and blogs and videos and courses that I found most effective in learning Terraform as I progressed in my understanding and experience with it in the real world. I also have 2 books that I would recommend among the many that I've read on Terraform that help you kind of get that up and running, see it in action, and start building on those blocks of understanding and knowledge from a real world perspective, leveraging Terraform. Also, if you're using Visual Studio Code and you want the extensions that I've been using for creating the Terraform templates, I would recommend the Azure Terraform template the Azure Terraform extension by Microsoft and the Terraform extension originally by Mikhail, but now owned by HashiCorp. That's going to give you some good IntelliSense, show you which properties are required. Are they strings? Are they booleans and so forth? Really helpful extension to use there too. Finally, a lot of people are interested in the certification with Terraform. HashiCorp has released a Terraform Associate certification. Myself, along with another Microsoft MVP, Ned Bellavance, we've co-authored a certification prep guide based on our personal real-world hands-on experience with Terraform. And we wrote this prior to HashiCorp releasing their certification guides as well. So there are some official ones, the study guide, exam review, and sample questions by HashiCorp themselves as well that you can leverage to learn. Finally, this is who I am. My name is Aidan Ermey. I work as a cloud solution architect specializing in Azure infrastructure at Microsoft. I not only do that side of things, but I do a lot of other areas that tie in to infrastructure as code and ARM and Terraform by deploying and configuring technologies in cloud management and security, our governance tool sets, our BCDR technologies, and so forth. This is how you can get a hold of me on the right. Either connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to email me, follow me on Twitter. Also, hit up my blog. I do have articles from the real world experience that I've had with Terraform. Not everything is happy or pretty, right? There's some real world challenges that I've hit and some issues with the language or with the provider that I share, as well as my GitHub repos, and then this video, among many others, are also on my YouTube channel. With that, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave a comment on things that you liked, things that you don't like, what you want to see next in a video, whether it's Terraform related or just Azure related, and I'll try to accommodate that. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching.